So we can say about 500 years before, there's year zero. And Nagarjuna is mainly thought to have lived in the 1st or the 2nd century after the Common Era began. So that's about 600 years after Buddha. So it takes all that time for, people's minds to be ready for the perfection of wisdom sutras, let's say. Well, why not? You think how long it is from where the world began until when the Buddha appeared on the earth. That's about 4.5 billion years, right? So it took 4.5 billion years of Earth's evolution. And let's say, there was no life on the Earth in the beginning, when the Earth was just a red hot mass of, glowing dust or something, glowing lava or whatever it was. Who knows, So for 500 million years, there wasn't any life. I mean, this is a scientific way of looking at life, not necessarily the way the Buddhists might look at it. But then you have for 4 billion years or 4.1 billion years of the evolution of life on this earth. And only then, after 4.5 billion years after the earth's been in existence, does Buddha come down and teach. Interesting, it took that long for, consciousness and matter sort of interact on the surface of this planet before Buddha could come and teach, and there were people who were ready to listen and could collect his teachings together and transmit them down the generations. As and Buddhism could become a sort of a movement, an enlightening influence in society. It took all that time, so it's not surprising that people might not have been ready for the perfection of wisdom sutras until 600 years after the Buddha had been here. Anyway, so that's Nagarjuna. So he's just 100 or 200 years after year zero. So then you have Buddhapalita, who's our main commentary we're going to be reading. So he's 470 until 540 years of the Common Era. So he's like, a couple of 100 years or maybe 300 years after Nagarjuna. Obviously Indian and writing in Sanskrit, Southern Indian, and very much in the classical Indian, Mahayana tradition. Did he study at Nalanda? I have no idea. So he was from South India. But Buddha, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is always speaking of the Nalanda tradition. So that's kind of, the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism that has served us so well. And that's what the Buddhists, the Tibetans took up into Tibet from, the rich collection of, ancient Indian culture. So then, after Buddhapalita, we jump to Tsongkhapa. Obviously, there's other masters in between. We could mention, Chandrakirti for a start. But Tsongkhapa comes along 1357 to 1419. So that's 600 years ago from last year that he died. So his anniversary was then, and very good biography by the Jimpa came out in last year, which is well worth reading. English biography in English. So Tsongkhapa kind of gives the Tibetan intellect gets to work on the middle way view and kind of let's say he perfects the middle way view. I mean, I prefer to say that. Obviously, there are other ways of interpreting, other people who wouldn't put Tsongkhapa in such a central place, but he's hard to beat. He's hard to beat, and he's got the reasoning, which and he's got the explanations, which help you to understand these tricky verses of Nagarjuna. And Buddhapalita's commentary is all there, yeah, but it's it's a little bit brief. It's all in prose. He's got Nagarjuna's he's got the right understanding, I would think, but it takes Tsongkhapa to elaborate things a bit, for the sort of West, for the more kind of weaker minds of the present day or something. Anyway, so that's the kind of timeline we're talking about. Yeah, so let's see how we get on then. We look at Nagarjuna and then we read Buddhapalita's text, and when it becomes difficult, then we rely on Tsongkhapa to you know, give us a bit of a twist, a bit of a tweak, so that it makes more sense of it. You know, let's look at the homage maybe first and see Nagarjuna's opening verse. Can we look at the homage, please, Jason? Can you show it, or I'll just read it?
We can see it.
Great, it's there. So we're obviously going to look at the 7th chapter, but we might as well, you know, begin at the beginning. So this is the homage that Nagarjuna is using when it's praising the Buddha, bowing down to the Buddha before he begins the composition of the main body of his text. Classic verse. To perfect Buddha I bow down, supreme of teachers, he who taught dependent relativity, without cessation or arising, or severance or permanence, no oneness and no separateness, no coming and no going forth, the end of fabrications, free. Yeah, so I'm not going to say a lot about that. You know, you could spend plenty of time unpicking the meaning of that, but that's what the verses are about, you know, to go into, you know, the details. So where can we get some details from? Well, anyway, so our subject is emptiness, basically. Our subject is ultimate truth as the middle way philosophers understand it. Nagarjuna sort of, he originates the middle way school. It wouldn't say he originates the middle way view. I mean, that's coming from Buddha, but he's sorting out the Buddha's, you know, you know, huge sort of great big garden, or, you know, great big garden of so many different texts, so many different varieties of sutra, so many different types of utterance, so many different teachings for so many different people. You know, so where do you extract, you know, the sort of, you know, the deepest analysis of reality, the one which, you know, takes you all the way, not just to individual liberation, but to Buddhahood itself. So what is the, you know, what is the real subtle, you know, presentation of reality that when you meditate on that will lead you to freedom from suffering, and freedom from, you know, just being kind of obsessed with your own happiness all the time, working for the benefit of others, you know, without any reservations. So we want this sort of, you know, pure version of emptiness. This is what we have to meditate on, to, you know, to clear away all those, you know, afflictions and kind of, you know, misunderstandings from our mind. So this is what he's really trying to explain, and you'll find he's quite forcefully on the side of the ultimate. You know, he says, he just says it quite bluntly there. There's no cessation, there's no arising, there's no severance, there's no permanence. You know, there's no oneness, no separateness, no coming and no going forth, and nothing. There's no qualifying that. You know, it's all like, you know, he's just denying all these things that the other Buddhist schools that he's kind of, you know, addressing. The other Buddhist schools are debating against him. The other Buddhist schools who don't kind of, you know, particularly like this idea of this radical emptiness that he's delivering to them. You know, they find it rather frightening or rather nihilistic. You know, so he's undercutting everything that they sort of just assume is there. Of course, they have their own views of selflessness. These other schools, they have their own idea of what the ultimate truth is and what you should meditate on to get rid of all your suffering. But it doesn't go, you know, they say, for Nagarjuna, they're not going far enough. You know, they're just going, you know, up to a certain point, which is very, very good, I suppose. But you know, when it comes to it, he's sort of devastating them with his sort of radical analysis. You see, so it's quite. It is quite radical, you know, no arising, no cessation, no severance, no permanence. But of course, you know, if you know even the Heart Sutra, so these words are very much in tune with the way the Heart Sutra delivers the message, you know, from the Buddha's utterance. So you know, it obviously relates quite closely to the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, as we're saying. Okay, so then this is spelt out a bit more, a bit more kind of, with a bit more kind of help, a bit more kind of, elaboration by Buddhapalita, and then it's clarified by Tsongkhapa, who says, yes, well, there's no arising ultimately, but if you're content with a sort of provisional, sort of merely relational, merely there in the perspective of the observer type of arising, then there's arising. But it's it's only this sort of conventional type of arising, merely there in the perspective of the observing mind. So what do you make of that? Well, the investigation is on. So let's try our best, and that'll make our lives worthwhile, I'm sure. So you can see, though, that he's actually bowing down to the Buddha because he taught dependent relativity, or dependent arising, or dependent origination. So different translations of that term, same term in Tibetan, more or less. Well, same term in Sanskrit. Tibetans have slightly different translations. Anyway, so you can see he's not just teaching mere nothingness. He's teaching dependent relativity. That is, without those qualities. So it's not the end of anything, it's the end of fabrication. So that's interesting. What does it mean by fabrications? Well, you can see that, if you get rid of your appearances, and you're grasping at inherent existence. So this is the obstacle to realizing emptiness, of course, our grasping at inherent existence. So if you get rid of the appearances of inherent existence, you realize that anything you're looking at, whether it's an internal thing like yourself or your body or your own mind, and the external phenomena like the world of form that we connect with, sounds and smells and tastes and visual objects. So when you get rid of the idea of that any of those inherently exist, so then at that point you're actually looking at reality, looking what's actually there. So but the point of the emptiness is there's nothing there from its own side. There's nothing there by way of its own characteristics. There's nothing there that has any power to be there, by any power of its own. So when you're looking at that, then then you're sort of you're grasping at inherent existence. Sort of has nothing left to grasp at. So you're just looking at voidness. So you can see, or you have to think, like, once you're taking that approach, so there's no appearance of inherent existence anymore, but then there won't be any appearance of conventional truth either. So all those things that you thought were there, like pot and pillar and house and table and the floor you're sitting on and so forth, when you're looking at reality, you're looking at their absence of having any nature of their own, any way of being that's theirs, that they exist by way of that nature. So it's very radical. So all the fabrications include all those conventional phenomena, you see. So it's not saying the conventional phenomena don't exist, but they don't exist by any power of their own, by any of their own, under their own sort of steam power, So when you're looking at emptiness, even those conventional phenomena have to drop away. Okay, when you arise from emptiness, then they appear, they're dependent arisings. If the cause and conditions are complete, then they appear. So, we're still working in the world of conventional truth, even after we realize emptiness. It's not like those things disappear completely, but they're part of the fabrications that dissolve when you sort of enter into the final view, which is very interesting, far different from our common everyday assumptions. Anyway, so we just have to work on this and gradually get the feel of what Nagarjuna is talking about by going through his verses, So let's just go step by step. So, why the seventh chapter then? Well, the seventh chapter is the one that is most complete in Sanskrit. It's a text by no means complete in Sanskrit. Nagarjuna's text of course, sorry, Nagarjuna's text is all there in Sanskrit. That was a very famous text, so many copies were made of it, so they just survived down the centuries. But Buddhapalita's commentary, Buddhapalita's commentary is survived much less well in Sanskrit. So yes, it's in Tibetan, and it's all, you know, pretty well translated in Tibetan. And, you know, the Tibetans did a good job. They dealt with the difficulties of the text, you know, in a very sensible way, and come up with something that was really, you know, a good job. But you feel if you want to translate something like Buddhapalita into English, you know, you want to go to the source. Really, you want to get to the, you know, the original language. It seems sort of natural to want to do that, I would have thought. You know, of course, everybody has different ways of translating, different styles, different amounts of time, different, you know, agendas and all that. So I'm not criticizing any other mode of translation. But if we can get down to the original language and look at that, then wouldn't that be really helpful? So I thought. Anyway, so if you're going to look at Buddhapalita in Sanskrit, then you're not going to find any more than about 14% of the text left in Sanskrit. So less than 20% is there in Sanskrit. So, you know, there's fragments basically. But this chapter number 7 was the one that's most complete. It's not one of his most famous chapters, you know, but that's all the more interesting for that maybe, you know, because the chapters that are most taught and the chapters that you'll find, even there's a book by His Holiness on, I think it's called The Middle Way or something like that. I can't remember the name of it now. And no. Anyway, so when His Holiness is taught on Nagarjuna, he's often taught just the 18th chapter, maybe the 20th, the 22nd, 24th, or something like that, 20th, 22nd, 26th, 20th, 20, the 18th, 20th, 24th, and 26th, I think. So those are 4 chapters further down the book, further down the text, where, you know, you can encapsulate what Nagarjuna is trying to say, you know, because they're sort of chapters on sort of important issues. Like there's one chapter on the self, one chapter is an investigation of the Four Noble Truths, one chapter is an investigation of the 12 links of dependent arising, and so on. So those are, you know, kind of considered, you know, really chapters where, you know, Nagarjuna, you know, says the essence of what he's trying to say in a sort of, you know, sort of a way that you can be presented as sort of a rounded teaching to somebody. You just pick those four chapters, fine. But the chapter I'm dropping on, so I don't think there's anything so special about it, but it was just like the one that happens to have, you know, be best preserved in the one text that they have, which is found in the Potala Palace. You know, Tibetans destroyed, the Chinese destroyed many ancient texts in Tibet, burnt a lot of them. But the ones that are in the Potala Palace weren't touched. There was a special kind of, you know, sort of order, I think, from Mao Zedong during the Cultural Revolution, you know, so the Red Guards weren't allowed to mess about with the Potala Palace, so everything that was in there was preserved, and in those sort of, you know, many storerooms down in the basement and so on, you know, there'd be lots of interesting stuff. So eventually some Chinese scholar pulls this text out and realizes it's, you know, the only fragments of Buddhapalita's commentary on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom standards that has been, you know, found. So, you know, he sort of deciphers it and publishes it. And so we can now look at it in Sanskrit. So what's Nagarjuna doing? You know, well, his first chapter, this is the 7th chapter, right? So his first chapter is the examination of conditions. So that's causes and conditions. Second chapter is the examination of motion, going, you know. Third chapter is the examination of the senses. Fourth chapter, examination of the aggregates. Fifth chapter, examination of the elements. Sixth chapter, the one before this one, examination of desire and the desirous one, or passion and the passionate one. And this chapter, the examination of arising, lasting, and ceasing. So he's taking different, you know, components of the, you know, the way the Buddhists analyze our world, and you know, going through them one by one and showing if you want to explain those things correctly, you have to give up the idea of there being anything such as inherent existence. if you cling to inherent existence, and none of those things that we're examining kind of make sense. Okay, Jason, well, we're finished with the homage now, so we can pull that one down if you like. Thank you. Yeah. So, maybe we can, maybe it's time to go to the text now then. So I hope you've all got the text. It was sent to you. So chapter 7, examination of arising, lasting, destruction. 34 verses, which we've heard recited now. So I've got the translation of the verses just interspersed in Buddhapalita's commentary with my own notes at the bottom of the page and a few at the back as well. So as I said, Nagarjuna is going through one by one these different aspects of Buddha's, the way the way the world is divided up by kind of Buddhist observers, but of course by most people are not such uncommon categories, and often the text is in the form of a dialogue. So there's somebody who's questioning, and we're giving the responses. Our own system is answering those questions. Some of the questions are merely like on the level of neutral inquiry, but you soon find that the person that Buddhapalita is talking to is he's trying to cling to inherent existence. He's trying to cling to the view that Nagarjuna is going to chop up, chop to pieces. But the defender, he's very persistent. He doesn't give up very easily. So he keeps coming back for more, and keeps getting, completely refuted every time. But that doesn't stop him trying. So let's read from the first page then, shall we? We've got the text. So yeah, some of you will have heard these first bits before, but maybe not so recently. Yeah, there's a lot of material here, so it needs going over a few times. So I think it's all right to start from the beginning. So the statement, through having conducted an examination of passion and the passionate, you have made my mind eager to hear about emptiness. So, now, the characteristics of the conditioned should be examined. Yeah, okay, in case you haven't got a copy, then Jason's putting it up on the screen for us.
It's in the chat. Guess you're going.
Yeah, well, I've got my copy. I'm all right. So
it's in the chat box. Guess you're going.
Yeah.
Okay,
but it's nice to see people's faces as well, If everybody's got a copy, of course. But if it's in the chat box, they should have. Everybody got a copy? Yeah, everybody's nodding their head, so everybody's looking like they're panicking. Yeah, so we'll rely on that then. You don't need to show it on the screen, I don't think, Jason. Thank you. Good. So that was the last chapter then. The chapter 6 was examination of passion and the passionate, or desire and the desirous. So that was a short chapter, and I haven't read it completely, but it's just getting into his question about the impossibility of things even passion and the passionate existing if they're going to be inherently existent. You can't have it. So the inquiry starts off very, politely with this person, eager to hear about emptiness. So now he's asking about the characteristics of the conditioned. So that's another, very much a Buddhist category, the conditioned phenomena, conditioned things, which is sometimes translated as compounded things or composed things. So it's a bit of a difficult one to translate, really. But it means compounded or composed out of or from causes and conditions. Okay. So where that comes in my notes, up here, I think. Yeah. So in Tibetan, the word is duche, and in Sanskrit, the word is samskirta. So the one Western scholar, I think it is de Vallée-Poussin, who wrote a commentary to Vasubandhu's work on the treasury and the Abhidharma of Vasubandhu, where this samskirta is, it's obviously a very common Buddhist term, right? It's not something that just the middle way philosophers are dreaming up. This is something which is, a very common Buddhist way of referring to things that are caused, things that are brought about by causes and conditions. So they are the conditioned phenomena. And it's explained etymologically, so what does that Sanskrit word mean? If you break it up, it means that which has been created, kirta, by causes in union and combination. Sam is like combination, coming together, collection, or combining. So kirta is created. That's probably the Sanskrit root, which is the same as our English word created, right? It's just coming from that Sanskrit root all the way down the centuries. It's managed to retain a recognizable similarity to its Sanskrit, or the forefather of the Sanskrit's very early branch in the Indo-European family tree, and English is the much more recent one. But you can see the similarities there. Yeah, so that which has been created by causes in union and in combination. So not all phenomena that Buddhists talk about are, these type of created phenomena, conditioned phenomena. Buddhists do talk about, permanent phenomena. So I'm sure most of you have heard about those. So I'm not going to digress. I'm going to stick with these, the conditioned ones. Just remember that there are some that aren't, there's some that are permanent, so you've got something to contrast these with. These conditioned ones are impermanent, These conditioned ones, do things, they perform functions, they take part in, the sort of evolution and the change and transformation that everything goes through. The permanent ones stand aside from that, they are kind of, unchanging and kind of a bit more abstract, but I'm not going to talk about those right now. So we're asked to talk about the conditions. So maybe this guy is thinking, look, when we get onto conditioned phenomena, I've got a good way of showing that these things really exist. He can't deny that there are such things as conditioned phenomena. So Buddhapalita says, yes, we shall do. We shall talk about conditioned phenomena. That's fine. Conditioned things. We're happy with that. So then the opponent, he says, well, arising, lasting, and destruction have been set forth as the general characteristics of the conditioned. Setting forth the characteristics of the non-existent is not appropriate. So, because their characteristics exist, the conditioned exist. So that's his way of showing that, well, you've got to admit that there are conditioned things because we have arising, we have lasting, and destruction. So those are exactly the characteristics of conditioned things. So if those things exist, then you've got to admit that conditioned phenomena exist. So that's his approach, yeah? So the object we're talking about is conditioned phenomena, conditioned thing. And the characteristics, what are the characteristics that phenomenon has? Well, they're characterized by, what are the features, what are the main kind of, identifying kind of sort of aspects. Well, arising, lasting, and destruction. Once we have arising, lasting, destruction, we have conditioned phenomena. Ah, yes, but Buddhapalita says the characteristics of the conditioned are not tenable. So how will the conditioned exist because they exist? So he's saying, yeah, you want conditioned, you want to prove conditioned things exist by saying that arising, lasting, and destruction exist. And they're the characteristics of the condition, right? But Buddhapalita is saying, yeah, well, hold on a bit. We're not accepting. You know, there is no such thing as arising, lasting, and destruction. So forget it. You know, that's not a good basis to prove conditioned things exist, because those characteristics themselves are not tenable. So there's no valid way of establishing them. So how will the conditioned exist because they exist? So then how can you deny, you know, how can you deny, you know, conditioned phenomena having the characteristics of arising, lasting, and destruction? So, well, it is now, if you ask that, then we're going back to a previous chapter. So we're going back to chapter 5, a previous refutation. So he's reminding us something that's already been talked about in a previous chapter, which we've just got one verse from here, or even just part of a verse. So this is from chapter 5, MMK, so that's Madhyamaka, Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So that's just a short way of saying, you know, Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom stanzas, okay? So when you see MMK at the end of the verse, that's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, so that's the fundamental middle way stanzas. So that's this text. So that V is chapter 5, and this is verse number 3, or a bit of verse number 3. No characteristic manifests in that without, or in that with a characteristic. Yeah. So here we're talking about the characteristics and the characterized. Characteristics and the characterized. So if you've done a bit of debating, that's the same thing as saying, you know, the definition and the definiendum. Or you might say, you know, defining characteristic, an object defined. Okay. So what do we mean by that? Well, you just take an example. So we have fire as the object that we're interested in, the object to be defined. And then we have hot and burning as the characteristics of that object. So, you know, he's saying that just in general, right, you can't have a characteristic, having characteristics, you can't have an object like, so the object characterized, you know, you can't have the object characterized or the object defined, because, you know, how does it connect up with its characteristics? So he's making a general point here, okay? You're asking about conditioned phenomena and the characteristics of conditioned phenomena. So I'm answering with a general kind of insistence, a general kind of problem for you, that, you know, how does the characterized object, the object characterized, and the characteristic, how do they fit together, you know? It's impossible to say how the object characterized has characteristics, just in general. Okay, so what's he on about then? Isn't this a bit abstract? Characteristic and object characterized. Well, I mean, a simple example is fire and hot and burning, yeah? So we single out fire in our minds, you know, this is some sort of phenomena in the world. So how do we decide what fire is? Well, it's, you know, what is its essential qualities? Well, you know, it's hot and burning, and that's how the Tibetans, you know, have decided to, you know, or sorry, the Indians, the Indian classical system, decided to define fire. It's hot, and then, you know, it consumes things in the act of, you know, burning. So don't think of chili just burning your lips, you know, that's like a burning sensation, but we're not really talking about that kind of burning. or if you touch with your hot saucepan with your fingers, you'll burn your fingers. But we're not really talking about that kind of burning. We're talking about the burning where, flames consume something, or the heat within an object. When it sort of touches things, it destroys them and uses them up. So the burning in that sense. So we have hot and burning as in the case of fire. So we can have many different kind of objects we could come up with, and many different kind of characteristics. But maybe just if you stick with one, it might be the best at the moment. So I'm going to read the note now, which is note number 2, towards the bottom of the page. So a characteristic is the essential quality or characteristics, the essential qualities of the object characterized that make it what it is and distinguish it from anything else. Just like you have a definition in the dictionary, it just separates that word out from the other word. It kind of gives you the kind of the perimeter or the boundaries of that word. So here we're not talking about words so much, but the actual object. So what makes that object, differentiates it from all other similar types of object? Well, it's defining characteristics. So that's hot and burning in the case of fire, for instance. And here, arising, lasting, and destruction in the case of the conditioned. We might translate defining characteristic and object defined, so long as we're aware that the focus here is on the characteristic and the object characterized themselves, and not on the words which express these two. So we're not like looking in the dictionary, so what are the words which define this word? What are the words which explain this word? No, we're thinking about fire itself and hot and burning itself. The fire that if you touch it, it will burn you. It's not like something you hear, not the word, but the actual object, right? Okay, so that's what we're thinking about. So it's not so much to do with dictionary definitions, but what's a defining characteristic? So the actual characteristics that makes fire what it is. Okay. So now, as for these conditioned phenomena, so in the Draper and Loseling Monastery, in their logic textbook, in the Draper and Loseling Monastic College Primer, Logic Primer, that of which the three, arising, lasting, and destruction or disintegration, are suitable, is the definition of the conditioned. Okay, so they're the defining characteristics. In the Sarah J Monastic College Logic Primer, however, disintegrating is the definition. So maybe I should say something about that. Each of these colleges where Tom Carver's views have been debated over the centuries, the great monasteries that I'm sure you've heard the names of. They all studying the same thing, but sometimes they have different definitions or different defining characteristics that they isolate as the qualities of an object. And so the Draper and Loseling College, that's taking arising, lasting, destruction or disintegration as the defining characteristics of the conditioned thing. So where's that coming from? Where's that definition or characterization of conditioned phenomena coming from? Any idea, Tom? Can Tom speak, or can he unmute his microphone? Jason, I don't know.
Do you mean the coming from the Abhidharma kosher, or is it coming from?
That's right. It's a good guess. Maybe it's a guess. I don't know, or maybe a no. Yeah. So that's the definition or the characteristics you'll find in Vasubandhu's Abhidharma kosher. Vasubandhu's Abhidharma kosher. So that's his Abhidharma work, or often referred to as the treasury. So the views of that Nagarjuna and the middle way philosophers are out to refute are often the views contained in that text. So that text is what position or what point of view is it written from, Tom?
It's from the Satantrika, the Sutra School.
Yes.
And Vaibhashika, is it as well?
Vaibhashika school, yeah.
Vaibhashika, great expressionist.
Yeah, so you get a combination of those two views in there, and more views. It's not just restricted to those two, but those are the two main ones. So what they say is that the root verses are written from the point of view of the Vaibhashika school, which is the great expositionist school. Great expositionist school. It's relying on a text called the Great Exposition, written by later followers of the Buddha, who were like trying to sort of codify Buddha's teachings. And then you've got a commentary to those root verses, and that commentary is in prose, and that commentary is from the Sautrantika point of view, or the Sutra follower point of view. So they rather reject this great exposition. They don't say that's the complete, we don't have to just base our system on that text and follow that blindly, So the Sutra followers that come along and they disagree with the great expositionists or Vaibhashikas on quite a number of points. And many things they agree with, many things it's just the same. But so you get two views in there, one in the root verses, which is the Vaibhashika, and one in the prose author commentary by the same author, Vasubandhu, who's critiquing his own verses, and saying, yeah, but there's actually, this is the better way to look at it, and giving some more refined positions, sort of by the Sautrantikas. Yeah. So it seems like that Draper and Loselin College, they're following that textbook, that classic work of Abhidharma. So these are the work of these lower schools, which the middle way philosophers saying, oh yeah, that's all very good, but in the end, it doesn't get you to that sort of deep realization of emptiness that we're looking for, that radical, sort of freedom from all kind of elaborations and kind of wrong views. So, we've got to refute you here, there. We've got to refute you on your point. So that's their presentation of the definition of the conditioned. And the other one from Sarajaya Monastic College Logic Prime is disintegrating. So that's the other definition from Sarajaya Monastery. So where do you think that one comes from then, Tom?
I don't know if that one. Yeah, sure.
Oh, we've not got much time left now, sorry. Anybody else like to say? Have a guess? Do you know, Jan? Or Hanneli?
No. Maybe I guess Dharmakirti.
Yeah, I would guess Dharmakirti. I wouldn't be absolutely sure, but I would theorize Dharmakirti. So he's also writing a lot of the time from the Sautrantika point of view. You see, he's also Nagarjuna is not aware of him. He's not at Nagarjuna's time. So Nagarjuna is not directly arguing against him. So he comes along later. But he also tries to refine the Sutra follower Sautrantika position, you see, and make it into something sort of a good way of a good perspective to debate from, to defend. So not necessarily his final view, but anyway. So I think maybe that disintegrating is coming from his text. So we're getting near to the end of the time now. So can we go to the questions sheet, Jason? Can we all look at that? Jason, earlier this evening, it sent you, I think it sent you a sheet of questions, or just for points of discussion. So maybe we should just finish off by looking at that now.
Yeah, just get it up.
Where's my copy? Yeah, that's the one. Thank you. That's the one. Lovely. So everybody should have a copy of this. And so it starts off with those two definitions. So this is something to think about, before the next class next week. Discuss with people. So if you take the first definition, Draper-Loesling definition, so we're arguing about characteristics and, you know, what are the defining characteristics of the condition, yeah? So before we start refuting with Nagarjuna's middle way logic, we should at least understand a little bit of what those characteristics are, you know, on the conventional level, without worrying about whether they exist inherently or not, you know, without worrying about Nagarjuna's attack, you know, get some feeling of what those things are supposed to be like, yeah? You know, before we start sort of criticizing, let's just understand a bit first. So the Draper-Loesling definition has got those three elements. So that you have to look in the text, in the note for the exact definition, and the Draper-Loesling monastic college logic primer, that of which the three, arising, lasting, and destruction, or disintegration, are suitable. Okay, so look in note 2 on the first page for actually get the definition. So then the questions are, regarding that definition then, pot is a common locus of being each of the three, arising, lasting, and ceasing, i.e. it is arising, it is lasting, and it is ceasing. Is that true? You've got to say, is that yes or no? We haven't really got time to discuss it now, so I can't give you any clues. So just think of that. Is that true? A common locus, it means, is it each of the three? Is it arising, is it lasting, and is it ceasing? The pot in front of you, or, you know, generally speaking, is that what a pot, is that true of pot? Okay, now the next question. If it is a common locus of being the two, A and B, so that is arising and lasting, right? I just put A and B. Maybe you should say the first and the second, if you could maybe just correct that. If it is a common locus of being the first two, yes, A and B, arising and lasting, is it necessarily both A and B simultaneously? So if it is A and it is B, does it have to be in both of them at the same time? What about that as a question? So just is the answer yes or no? Or you could say pot arises, lasts, and ceases. Is that true? I don't know how good your English is, you know, not all of you are native speakers of English, you know, but pot is arising, is lasting, and is ceasing. Does that sound okay? Or is it safer to say pot arises, lasts, and ceases, you know? So I haven't got time to go into the details now, but, you know, just think about that. Is pot doing all those three things? And is it doing them all at the same time? That's the basic question. And just on the Sarah J definition, disintegrating means the same as momentary. So, you know, momentary is the definition of impermanent. Many of you will know that. So disintegrating is the same as momentary. So what's the difference between gross and manifest impermanence and subtle impermanence? So we talk about the difference, you know, between gross impermanence and subtle impermanence. So how do you know? How do you say what the difference is? How to realize the subtle impermanence of such a conditioned thing as a pot? Okay, so you know what's subtle impermanence. So we have to talk about gross and subtle impermanence. Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you just have to live with it. But you know, for those who have studied a bit of debate, these things come up. And then, you know, there's the next question is going into, you know, what Nagarjuna is saying, what his attack is, you know, what is criticism of the lower school's understanding of characteristic and object characterized. So we won't go into that now because we haven't had time to talk about it yet. But by all means, read the question and finish off reading the note at the bottom of page 1. Yeah, and think about what it means with it characteristic and object characterized. Yeah. So somebody, you know, maybe your friend comes along and says, "Oh, you know, I just moved into a new flat. You know, we've just sort of just started renting a new flat, a new apartment, right?" So naturally, immediately you'll say, "Oh, yeah, what's it like then?" You know. So they tell you what they've got, and then immediately you want to know what the characteristics are. Is it big? Is it small? You know, how many rooms has it got? Has it got a nice kitchen? Has it got a nice view? You know. Or if you go into a shop, and you want to buy something, you want to buy a lawnmower, let's say. You want to buy a lawnmower for cutting your grass. So you go to the shop and say, well, I want to buy a lawnmower. I need a lawnmower. So the salesman is going to, he thinks he's going to look at you and say, this guy has obviously not done any research on the subject. He's not looked on the internet. He's just coming and he wants a lawnmower. Okay. So what are you going to ask him? You say, well, what kind of lawn have you got there? What kind of lawn do you want to cut? He could just say, well, what kind of lawnmower do you want? There's so many different kinds, but a good salesman would ask him, what he's going to use it for. So what kind of lawn have you got then? So he's got to think what characteristics his lawnmower that guy needs is going to want, Does he need a big one or a small one? Is he got a lawn that's, 100 meters square, or a lawn that's only, 5 meters square? Yeah. So there's all types of different lawnmowers. So he needs to know what characteristics of the lawnmower that's going to suit that guy. So this thing about characteristic and object characterized isn't something like just philosophers dream up, because they're so abstract and so cut off from the world that they will prepare to talk about those things. The philosophers, like the middle way philosophers, are only talking about them because that's how people in the world talk. We're always talking about, the object characterized and its characteristics. What kind of lawnmower do you want? Do you want one with a motor, or is electric motor okay? Have you got an electric power source near to your lawn? And is it going to be like for, are you going to play golf, or are you going to sort of have, need really short grass, or what kind of grass have you got? So obviously there's so many different characteristics that different kinds of lawnmower can have, just as a worldly example. So don't think this is just some sort of philosophical game. It's like we're trying to get at the way the world understands things, and then get at the ultimate truth which lies beneath all that. But I have to stop there. Okay, so we've had our time now. I'm sure you're a bit tired listening to me talk all this time. Okay, maybe some more questions next week. Yeah, it's all a bit of a long introduction there. I look forward to seeing you next week then. Do some debating.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Okay.
Thank you.